Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
This week, Rachel, my wife, and I, and a group of us from the synagogue, has been mentioned that we didn't see each other there all because there were so many people. But we were at the march in Washington, the biggest march for American Jewry in this nation. It was so powerful to be together amidst everything going on and to see the sea of flags and people draped in the flags and to hear the performances. And just to say we're here, the Jewish people lives, people of Israel lives. And to see our people, small as we are, in all of our multitudes, really a moment for the ages. It was interesting because all of the week before, what had been on my mind have been our two people, Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims. And all the times in my life where I've had interactions with Palestinians in Israel, in different meetings and peace talks that I've been involved in. Once I was a volunteer at an international conference of world religious leaders in Israel. And the bus had a stop in the West Bank in Bethlehem to visit a school. When we arrived, the students didn't go run up to meet, the Palestinian students didn't go to run up to meet their personal representative of the Dalai Lama, who was in his purple robes, or one of the top Swami scholars in the world. But rather they came to me, a Jew, because I was wearing a kippah, and they never got to have a personal interaction with a Jew before. And they crowded around me, and I remember it being a very intimate and moving moment. Or once I was part of a group of Israelis and Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians, and we did group therapy together. I remember meeting very lovely people and keeping in touch. And I also remember the time we did it, the second time, it was not as successful because most of them quit the group after they were threatened for holding normalizing talks with Israelis. And sometimes a less welcoming attitude as a journalist I encountered. But even in these past few weeks, everywhere, there was an evening where Rachel and I went to a restaurant, and just before we put up hostage posters right outside a restaurant. And then we walked in. And of course, the only other people in the restaurant were a group of religious Muslims. Then we had a filming crew here at the synagogue to film a TV series. And the whole crew were Egyptian. And God has a sense of humor. We can't get away from each other. And that closeness between us is also the source of our tragedy. We're two people fighting for the same land. We hope and pray that one day to turn that closeness into something else. But so much of the book of Genesis is about that closeness and the strife of brothers and sisters, Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, the fathers of the Jewish nation, of the Arab people, Jacob and Esau, Rachel and Leah, sisters who compete for the love and the offspring of their husband, Joseph and his brothers who want the love of their father Jacob so badly, and they all become angry with Joseph when he receives the multicolored coat, and they throw him in a pit. And it's about that closeness, it's about vying for that love. Cain murders Abel because God loves Abel more than Cain. And then we see God in all of this. Well, God also comforts Ishmael after he and Hagar have to be sent away as commanded by God, because tragically there's no room for both of them in the same family. Or God who gives Rachel love from her husband and Leah children, but neither of them have both. Or God who's in the picture trying to lead Joseph and his brothers back together. And as a Haftarah for Acharei Mot Kedoshim says, are you, in the name of God, are you not to me like the children of Ethiopians, O children of Israel, the words of God? Have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, but also the Philistines from Kaftor and Aram from Kir? And that God loves all of his children. And that is the ultimate truth, even if it doesn't always manifest that way in our world. And then this terrible conflict that Jews and Arabs we've been in for 100 years, we're each turning all over the world, saying, give me love, understand me. Last week I spoke at a local church in Oak Park about Israel, so that they should hear a little bit about our narrative. And to hear some of them come up afterwards and feel so warmly in hearing our story and our narrative was so moving, as when hearing the speeches from the world leaders or the leaders at the march, saying our truth, our vision. And so in our parsha this week, the twins who are at war are Jacob and Esau. Jacob, who, as we read in the triennial reading, steals Esau's blessing and his inheritance. But even in their womb, they're fighting so much that their mother calls out to God, what's all this commotion? Why do I exist? And God tells their mother, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. And when they're born, she sees they're twins. One is ruddy and hairy and becomes a hunter, Esau. The other is smooth-skinned, a quiet man who dwells in tents, and that is Jacob. And their story is one of tragedy, and perhaps it's necessary tragedy, because Jacob was the more fitting one to lead the Jewish people, but also hardship for both of them. For Esau, his pain of losing the blessing, for Jacob, who has to be in exile for 21 years. And Rashi, the French commentator, has a series of interesting words. He says first, well, God says 2 nations shall issue from your body, one to his wicked ways and the other to his plain life, which is a theme which our rabbis elaborate on through the millennia, that the justness of Jacob and the wickedness of Esau, who is symbolic of Western civilization, of Greece, of Rome, of the Nazis. But yet he also says that God's promise that one people shall be mightier than the other doesn't mean it's always the same nation who will be mightier than the other, but rather they'll never be mighty at the same time. When one is laid waste and in ruins, the other is on top, but then it's going to flip around again. And Rashi also comments that when it says 2 peoples are in your womb, it alludes to the nobility of both Jacob and of Esau. And Rashi sees a very interesting hint. He says that one day, what this was hinting at, that there would be 2 leaders that would come up, of Esau and of Jacob, and those 2 leaders would finally get along. He says this is a rabbinic tradition, that this is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and the Roman Emperor Antoninus. We studied this in our Thursday morning class a few weeks ago. But there's these series of rabbinic stories that these 2 leaders, in the years after the Bar Kokhba revolt, after the Jews had been sent into exile, became fast friends, the Roman emperor and the head of the Sanhedrin, and they would regularly meet to talk about life, the universe, the divine. As Rashi adds, and their table was always plenty. There was never lacked lettuce or radish, whatever season it was. They both had wealth and they both had so much to discuss. And so if the leader of the Jewish people could develop a friendship with the Roman emperor at that time, we have to believe that it's possible for us too. We are so close. What separates us is still so wide, and it's the brokenness of this world. And to truly bridge it, we can't ignore that brokenness. We can't pretend it's not there. We have to deal with the brokenness. And one day, maybe hear each other and learn to even love the story and the narrative of the other. Because neither people are going anywhere. We are small people, and they're part of a very big nation. And yet, who is mighty and who is not? Hard to know. But once all this dust settles, and our generational pain, and this parsha is called Toldot, generations, we have to hope, even as hopeless as it appears right now, that something new can emerge. We can sit at the same table, a table of plenty for everyone, and discuss the great topics of life as brothers and sisters. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.